I didn't inherit my dad's house. I negotiated for it, condition by condition, and somewhere in the middle of the argument, I finally understood why he wrote that list in the first place. Posted to r/true off my chest. I want to start by saying that I love my father. I want that on record before I describe what happened over the past 4 months, because by the end of this story it might not seem that way. His name is Gerald, Jerry to his friends, Dad to me, and he is 69 years old, a retired civil engineer from Columbus, Ohio, who has lived in the same 4-bedroom colonial on Birchwood Lane for 31 years. He planted every tree in that yard. He replaced the gutters himself 3 different times. He once drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to fix a broken furnace rather than call a contractor, because calling a contractor, in Gerald's philosophy, was an admission of personal failure. My name is Claire. I'm 37. I'm a licensed occupational therapist, divorced for 3 years, mother of one 9-year-old daughter named Nora. I live in a rented townhouse 12 minutes from my father's place, which I have always considered convenient and which my father has always considered insufficient evidence of commitment to the family. My mother, Patricia, passed away 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. It was fast and it was brutal and it rearranged everything. The way I think about time, the way I talk to my daughter before school, the way I look at my father's house, which is full of my mother's curtains and my mother's ceramic roosters on the kitchen windowsill and my mother's smell, still somehow, in the linen closet. This story begins on a Tuesday in November, when my father called me at 7:15 in the morning and asked me to come over after work. He had something he wanted to discuss. The offer. He made pot roast. That was the first warning sign. My father only makes pot roast for occasions. Christmas, Nora's birthday, the night he told me my grandfather had died. We sat at the kitchen table, the same oak table where I'd done 20 years of homework, and he poured himself a glass of Merlot and folded his hands and looked at me with an expression I recognized as his "I have been thinking about this for a long time" face. "I want to give you the house," he said. I put down my fork. The house on Birchwood Lane is, by current Zillow estimates, worth somewhere between $380,000 and $410,000. It is fully paid off. My father has no mortgage, no liens, no debt of any kind. He is a man who keeps a physical ledger book for his monthly expenses, organized by category, written in mechanical pencil. "Dad," I said, "hear me out." He reached under the table and produced a manila folder. He placed it between our plates with the gravity of a man presenting closing arguments. "I've been thinking about this since your mother passed. The house should go to you. Marcus is in Portland, he's got his life, he's not coming back here. You're the one who's close. You're the one who brings Nora over. This is where the family is. Marcus is my brother. He is 42, lives in Portland with his partner and their 2 rescue dogs, and has, over the past 15 years, constructed an elaborate psychological and geographic distance from our father that I have alternately envied and resented." "That's incredibly generous," I said carefully. "Open the folder." Inside the folder were 4 pages, printed from a word processor, single-spaced, with numbered sections. At the top, centered and underlined, were the words, "Conditions of transfer." "Before I sign anything over," my father said, picking up his wine, "there are some conditions we should agree on." I looked at the document. I counted 11 conditions. I drove home that night with the folder on my passenger seat and Nora asleep in the back, and I sat in my driveway for 22 minutes reading it by the glow of my phone screen. I will reproduce them here as accurately as I can, because they are central to everything that followed. Condition 1. Claire will reside in the home as her primary residence within 6 months of transfer and will not rent, lease, or sublet the property to any party. Reasonable. I could work with this. Condition 2. Claire will host Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners annually, and Gerald will be welcomed as a guest at all family gatherings held at the property. Fine. Expected, even. I liked having holiday dinners. Condition 3. Gerald retains the right to occupy the back bedroom, which he refers to as the guest room, but which is demonstrably his bedroom, with his recliner, his model trains, and 17 years of accumulated National Geographics, for no fewer than 3 weeks per year, with 60 days advance notice. Okay. Starting to feel the edges of something here, but manageable. Condition 4. The ceramic rooster collection currently displayed in the kitchen will remain in the kitchen, in a place of prominence. The collection consists of 11 roosters. Gerald specifies 11. He counted. I stared at this one for a while. My mother collected those roosters. I understood the sentiment. I also noted that my father was writing property conditions about ceramic chickens. Condition 5. Claire will not alter the exterior paint color without Gerald's written approval. Uncomfortable. The house is a kind of faded sage green that I have privately described as the color of regret. But I understood the attachment. Condition 6. Gerald's workshop in the basement will remain accessible to him at all times, and its contents will not be removed, relocated, or disposed of without Gerald's explicit written consent. This was where it started getting complicated. The workshop is approximately 400 square feet of Gerald's collected tools, machinery, lumber scraps, and what I can only describe as organized chaos. It takes up nearly a third of the basement. If I were to live there with a child, I had thoughts about that basement. Condition 7. Claire will not remarry or introduce a romantic partner as a permanent cohabitant without a 60-day notice period and a family conversation with Gerald present. I read this twice. I read it a third time. I set the folder down. I picked it back up. Condition 8. Nora will attend Sunday dinners at the property a minimum of twice per month, barring illness or prior commitment, which Gerald had parenthetically noted did not include social engagements with friends. There was something genuinely loving buried in this condition, and something genuinely controlling sitting right next to it. Condition 9. Claire will maintain the yard in a condition consistent with neighborhood standards, which Gerald had thoughtfully defined in an attached half-page document describing mowing frequency, edging technique, and acceptable mulch colors. The attached mulch document was, I have to say, impressive in its specificity. Condition 10. Gerald retains veto authority over any major renovations, defined as any project exceeding $5,000, until his death. I sat with this one for a long time. We're talking about a $400,000 asset. He wanted to retain financial veto authority over significant improvements to a property he would no longer own. Condition 11. Claire will visit Gerald at his new residence. He planned to move to a senior living community called Meadowbrook Estates, no fewer than twice per month, each visit lasting no less than 90 minutes. He had scheduled his own visits into a property deed. I sat in that driveway until my phone battery hit 11% and the October cold started coming through the car windows, and I thought, I am a 37-year-old woman with a master's degree, a professional license, a child, and a mortgage-level asset on the table. I have spent my entire adult life learning how to negotiate care plans with insurance companies, treatment goals with patients who don't want to be in therapy, and parenting schedules with an ex-husband who once submitted a 17-point email about whose responsibility it was to buy Nora's soccer cleats. I knew exactly what this was. It wasn't a deed. It was a relationship document. It was my father trying to architect the next chapter of his life using real estate law as the mechanism. I called my brother. Update 1. The first conversation. Marcus, to his credit, did not laugh. He made a sound that was adjacent to laughing, and then he stopped himself, and then he said, very carefully, "He gave you a term sheet." "He gave me a term sheet," I confirmed. "For a house." "For his house. Technically, future my house." "Claire." A long pause. Condition 7. "I know. He wants approval rights over your dating life." He framed it as a family conversation. That is the same thing. Marcus and I talked for an hour and a half. He offered to call our father. I told him not to. He offered to fly out. I told him maybe later. What I told him, and what I had decided sitting in that driveway, was that I was not going to dismiss the offer, and I was not going to capitulate to it, and I was not going to have an emotional argument with a 69-year-old grieving widower about ceramic roosters and mulch color. I was going to negotiate. I called my friend Diane the next morning. Diane is a family law attorney in Dublin, Ohio. She is also the person who helped me through my divorce, and she is fluent in the language of people who confuse love with control and mean well by it. "Walk me through every condition," she said. I did. "Okay," she said when I finished. "Several of these have no legal standing anyway. You understand that? You can't actually deed a house with behavioral conditions attached that are unenforceable. The mulch requirements, the Sunday dinners, the dating notice period, none of that would survive a legal challenge. What he's giving you is a document of intentions, not a contract." "I know," I said. "But that's not the point. If I ignore the conditions or argue that they're unenforceable, I blow up the relationship. If I accept them wholesale, I'm living under a set of rules my father wrote for a grief he hasn't finished processing." Diane was quiet for a moment. "So what do you want to do?" "I want to respond in kind," I said. "He gave me a term sheet. I'm going to give him a counteroffer." Another pause. "You know this could go badly. Everything with my father could go badly. That's the entire history of us. I spent 2 weeks on my response document. I am not exaggerating. I made a spreadsheet. I color-coded the 11 conditions into 3 categories: accept, counter, and decline with rationale. I consulted Diane twice more. I talked to my therapist, Dr. Osei, who had the particular expression he wears when I bring him something he finds professionally fascinating and personally alarming. "You're treating this like a business negotiation," he observed. "It is a business negotiation. There's a $400,000 asset involved. It's also your relationship with your father. Those things are not mutually exclusive." He wrote something in his notebook. I chose not to ask what. My counterproposal was 6 pages. I titled it Response and Counterproposal to Conditions of Transfer, Birchwood Lane Property. I formatted it with section headers and numbered paragraphs. I printed 2 copies on cardstock, put them in a manila folder identical to my father's, and brought it to Birchwood Lane on a Saturday afternoon with a box of his favorite glazed donuts from Destination Donuts, because I am a strategist, not a monster. Update 2, the counter. My father opened the door and saw the folder under my arm, and his expression was something I will carry with me for a long time. Equal parts surprise and recognition, like a chess player watching the opponent pick up a piece they didn't expect to move. "You made a document," he said. "You made a document," I said. He let me in. We sat at the kitchen table again. No pot roast this time. He hadn't been expecting this, which was intentional. I wanted a working session, not a ceremony. I opened my folder and slid his copy across the table. "I've gone through your 11 conditions," I said. "I want to tell you which ones I accept unconditionally, which ones I want to modify, and which ones I can't agree to." He put on his glasses. "Accepted without modification. Conditions 1, 2, 4, 8 with 1 clarification, and 11 with 1 clarification." I told him I would live there. I would host holidays. I would keep my mother's roosters in the kitchen. I would bring Nora to family dinners. And I would visit him at Meadowbrook Estates twice a month. I committed to that sincerely, not strategically. His jaw had loosened slightly. I think he'd expected a fight from the first line. Accepted with modification. Conditions 3, 5, 6, and 9. The back bedroom, yes, he could stay for extended visits, but I proposed a 30-day advance notice instead of 60, with a cap of 4 weeks total per year rather than no fewer than 3, which had no ceiling. He looked at this and nodded slowly. The paint, yes, I would consult him before changing the exterior. I was not willing to give him approval rights, but I was willing to give him a formal consultation process and a 30-day window to share his concerns in writing, after which the decision was mine. The workshop, this is where I had done the most careful work. I had a proposal. He could maintain access to the workshop for 3 years post-transfer. During that time, I would not remove or dispose of any items. At the end of 3 years, we would conduct a joint inventory, and any items he had not accessed or used in that period would be donated, sold, or disposed of at my discretion, unless he actively reclaimed them. I had written this with Diane's help, because I wanted it to be reasonable, detailed, and completely defensible. He took off his glasses and set them on the table and looked at the workshop proposal for what felt like a very long time. "That's fair," he said finally. It came out sounding like it surprised him. The mulch, I accepted the general spirit of yard maintenance and removed the specific mulch color requirements, which I described in my document, diplomatically, as aspirationally detailed. He almost smiled. Declined with rationale. Conditions 7 and 10. I had written these sections with the most care. Condition 7, the romantic partner clause, I declined entirely, and I want to quote from my document here because I'm proud of how I wrote it. Condition 7 asks that I provide notice and obtain approval for introducing a permanent cohabitant or future spouse. I understand this condition comes from a place of care for Nora and for family cohesion. I share those values. However, I am a 37-year-old adult, and this condition, as written, places parental approval authority over decisions that are mine to make. I am willing to commit, in good faith and in writing, to the following. I will introduce any serious romantic partner to you before any discussions of cohabitation. I will not make changes to Nora's living situation without proper consideration of her well-being and, where appropriate, discussion with you as her grandfather. What I cannot agree to is a formal veto or mandatory conversation as a prerequisite. I hope you will accept this as the spirit of what you intended. My father read that section twice. He did not speak. He picked his glasses back up. Condition 10, the renovation veto, I proposed a modification rather than outright rejection. I would consult him on any major renovation and provide 30 days for him to raise concerns. For structural changes, additions, major layout alterations, I would request his input formally. But the final decision, on a property I owned, would be mine. I offered, instead, to establish a small house fund, $2,000 annually for the first 5 years, specifically for maintaining the elements of the property that held personal significance to him, including the workshop structure and the original kitchen cabinetry my mother had chosen. The Kitchen Cabinet Fund. I'm still proud of that one. Update 3, the standoff. He didn't respond for 9 days. I know this because I counted. I called once on day 4 to check in, not about the document, just generally. How was he feeling? Had he talked to his friend Don? Did he need anything? Normal. He was cordial, slightly distant, said he was thinking things over. Marcus called me on day 6. He called me, he said. Of course he did. He's not angry. He used the word impressed. That's not the same as agreeing. No. But he also isn't digging in. He said, and I quote, "She gets it from her mother." I had to go sit outside for a few minutes after that. On day 9, he called me. It was a Sunday, 11 in the morning, and I could hear the television in the background. A football pregame, which meant he'd been up since 7 at least, which meant he'd been thinking. "I want to talk about Condition 7, he said. Okay. I'm not trying to control your life, Claire. I know, Dad. He stopped. This was the particular silence my father deployed when he was about to say something true. After your mother died, I felt like everything was happening at me. Marcus moved to Portland before she was even gone a year. Your divorce. Nora getting older, and I can see it happening. She's going to be a teenager, and then she's going to leave, and another stop. The house is the last thing I have. That I built. That means something. And I'm trying to give it to you, and that's the right thing to do, and I needed to feel like I still mattered to what happens there. I was standing in my kitchen. I pressed my hand flat against the counter. Dad, I said. You matter. You're Nora's grandfather. You're my father. The house is not the thing that makes you matter. The silence this time was different. That Condition 7 thing was foolish, he said finally. I know that. It came from a real feeling, I said. I understand the real feeling. The renovation veto, he said. That's the other one. I know. The cabinet fund. I could hear him working through something. That was a good idea. Yeah. Okay. We talked for 40 minutes. He didn't agree to everything that day. But by the end of the call he'd verbally accepted conditions 1 through 6 in their modified forms, and he said he would sit with 7 and 10. 3 days later, he emailed me. My father, who types with 2 fingers and considers email a modern imposition, composed and sent me a 6-paragraph email. He accepted my modified version of Condition 7. He proposed one final modification to Condition 10. He would retain consultation rights, not veto, on renovations for 5 years instead of 3, and after that the house was mine completely and without qualification. I sat at my kitchen table and read that email 4 times. Then I wrote back, agreed. I'll have Diane draft the transfer documents this week. Update 4, the transfer. The deed transfer happened on a Thursday in February, at Diane's office downtown. My father wore his good coat, the charcoal wool one he saves for court dates and funerals, and, apparently, this. I wore a blazer. Nora came with us because she had a half-day at school and because I wanted her to be there, though I didn't explain the full significance. I told her Grandpa was giving us a very special gift. The house, she asked. How did you know? Grandpa told me at Thanksgiving. She looked at me with the particular unsurprised expression of a 9-year-old who understands more than the adults assume. He said he wanted me to have a yard. I had to look out the window of the car for a moment. Diane had prepared a clean transfer document, a gift deed with an attached memorandum of understanding that incorporated the agreed-upon conditions in their final, modified forms. She had been careful to note, in her cover letter to both parties, which conditions were legally enforceable and which were expressions of good faith, and that both parties were entering this agreement with full understanding of the distinction. My father read every page. He brought a pen from his coat pocket, a specific pen, a Waterman that had been his father's, and he signed his name to the deed in that deliberate, architectural handwriting that I have known my whole life. Then he looked at me across the table. Your mother would have liked this, he said. The negotiating part. She always said you got my stubbornness and her strategy. She was right, I said. I signed. Nora, who had been sitting in the corner drawing in a sketchbook, looked up. Does this mean I get the big room? My father laughed. It was the first time I had heard him laugh in, I don't know, a long time. Update 5. What happened next? I moved into the house on Birchwood Lane the first weekend of April. It took 3 trips and 2 rented cargo vans, and Nora made exactly 1 complaint about sharing a bathroom with the guest room my father was already planning his first visit around. I kept the ceramic roosters in the kitchen. All 11 of them. I rearranged them slightly. 2 had been facing the wall, and I rotated them forward, but I kept them in a place of prominence, as specified, and I will be honest, I like them there. They look like my mother's kitchen. They look like home. My father moved into Meadowbrook Estates in March, 3 weeks before our transfer date. His apartment has a small balcony. He has already set up the model trains in the second room. He video called me the day he finished them and walked me through the entire layout, explaining the route of each train, the name he'd given each locomotive, the miniature station signs he'd labeled with towns from his childhood. I watched the whole thing. I asked questions. Nora, who was next to me on the couch, became genuinely interested and asked if she could visit, which made my father produce an expression I have no word for. I visit twice a month. I have not missed a visit. Sometimes I bring Nora. Sometimes I bring coffee and sit with him on the balcony and we talk about the neighborhood, his friend Don who won the Meadowbrook Shuffleboard tournament, whether the spring will be early this year. We talk about my mother sometimes. Not always. But sometimes. He came to visit the house in late April. First official visit, 5-day notice, back bedroom, exactly as agreed. He spent a morning in the workshop reorganizing the lumber racks. He retouched a section of the back porch railing he'd been meaning to fix for 2 years. He made pot roast on the second night, and we ate at the kitchen table with Nora doing homework in the next room, and it felt like a version of something I hadn't had in a long time. Not the past, exactly. Something adjacent to the past. Something that had come through grief and negotiation and careful, stubborn love into a new shape. The mulch, he said, over dinner. I looked at him. You used the brown bark chips. On the front beds. I did. I recommended the black. You did. He looked out the window toward the front yard. The brown looks better, he said, with the measured tone of a man making an enormous concession. I'll pass that along, I said. What I want people to take away from this. I have seen a lot of posts on this sub that boil down to, my parent did something controlling, I went no contact, the end. I understand why that's sometimes the answer. I'm not here to judge it. But my father is not a villain. He is a 69-year-old man who lost his wife and watched his children scatter and is standing at the edge of an old age he never fully planned for, holding out the most valuable thing he owns, which is also the most emotionally significant thing he has ever built, and asking, in the language of terms and conditions because he does not have another language for I am afraid, asking to still matter. The 11 conditions were never about house paint and mulch. They were about grief and control and the particular terror of becoming irrelevant to the people you love. I could have said no to all of it. I could have said yes to all of it. Both of those would have been failures. What I did instead was take him seriously. I met the document with a document. I honored the real feelings underneath the unacceptable terms, and I declined the unacceptable terms anyway. I found the place where his needs and my dignity could coexist, and I built a structure around that place, the way he would have done, methodically, with a plan, with attention to load-bearing elements. He gave me a house. I gave him a negotiation that told him he was worth negotiating with. My mother's roosters are in the kitchen. Nora has the big room. My father is coming for Memorial Day weekend, and I am already dreading and looking forward to it in equal measure, which is, I think, exactly what family is supposed to feel like. TLDR, my 69-year-old dad tried to deed me his $400,000 house with 11 personal conditions, including romantic partner approval rights and a mulch color specification. I responded with a formal counterproposal. We negotiated for 4 months like two people who love each other very much and have no idea how to say so. I got the house. He got the family dinner schedule. The roosters stayed. Edit. Yes, the mulch document was attached as Exhibit A. No, I will not be sharing it. It is private, it is specific, and frankly it deserves to be preserved. Edit 2. Marcus says hi. He came out for the move-in weekend and helped me carry boxes and ate pot roast with us and cried in the backyard when he thought no one was watching. We all saw. Nobody said anything. That was the right call.